Have you ever worried about slipping in the bathroom or helping a loved one get up safely? You need to know about Safety Grip. Unlike outdated smooth metal grab bars, Safety Grip has a unique textured design that gives a better grip and more control, especially for those with weak or tired hands. It looks great, feels secure, and installs just like a regular bar. Visit heartmobility.com to learn more.
Welcome to the Aging Together podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Pooja Ashok Patel, an occupational therapist with board certification in gerontology and additional specialty certifications in dementia and fall prevention. In this podcast, I interview guests who are experts in their fields and caregivers who share their lived experiences. Let's meet today's guest. Our guest today is H. Frances Reaves, elder law attorney and author of the book, Boomers Booming: How to Thrive After 65 and Have Good Sex. Inspired by her experience caregiving for her parents in their final years, Frances became a passionate advocate for older adults, fighting against exploitation and navigating the complexities of aging. Her diverse career spans international marketing, law, and media, having interviewed icons like Margaret Thatcher and Gloria Steinem. Now, as the managing attorney of her elder law firm, she helps families plan for the future with estate and Medicaid planning. Fluent in Spanish and well-traveled since childhood, Frances brings a global perspective to aging with dignity and independence. Frances, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, Pooja, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And I loved your introduction, succinct, hit the highlights.
Well, you're so well accomplished. When I got the whole bio, I was like, oh, we're going to be talking for 30 minutes on just the bio. So I had to shorten it a little bit.
I love it. I love it. You could send that to me. That would be great.
I will. Let's start with your caregiving journey. Can you share how 3 years of caregiving for your parents sort of shaped your perspective on aging and then influenced your decision to write this new book that you've just written?
I know, my memoir to mom and dad. Well, the truth of the matter was I had no idea. I was a litigator and then I went into politics. And when I came back out of politics, I was sort of looking at what to do next. And mom and dad were sort of at the end of their seniorhood. Dad was in his late 80s and mom was like 82, maybe. Well, I know it was like 80 and 86 when all this started for them. And mom had dementia. It was vascular. It wasn't like a Lewy body or an Alzheimer's. It was a vascular dementia, but nevertheless, it took a toll on my father. And honestly, my brother and I were really pretty good about visiting. I would go, they lived in Houston, Texas. First, I lived in Baltimore, and then I lived in Miami. And I would try to make the trip to Houston once a month, my brother every other month. We just tried to complement each other. And we sort of knew that mom wasn't doing very well, but we were like dad. We kind of ignored it, which isn't really the smartest thing to do. But then, dad started losing weight because he, like his eldest, me, didn't know how to cook. And mom couldn't anymore. And, really, he didn't know what to do. He sort of just took his lead with her. So we did little things like get a maid for them to come once a week and clean up. And about 3 years in, we decided to have someone come in like 3 times a week for 4 hours a day to give dad a break so he could go run errands, et cetera, et cetera. And then dad's 90th birthday came. And this was sort of when Matt, my brother, and I realized this was it, because the entire family came in, not just his kids, but all his nieces, his nephews. It really was a terrific birthday party. And mom, she bucked up for Friday and Saturday nights. It was all around their home. And then Sunday morning, we were having brunch. And mom came over to me and she calls me Franny. And she said, Franny, it really is time for me to go home. I'm exhausted. Well, she was home. So it's when I realized, okay, this is so much worse. Now, we'd had a couple of phone conversations, Mom and I, where she was concerned about where she was. So this was like the last straw. So I talked to Matt and we agreed that it was Atlanta or Miami. We gave Dad the choice. He decided on Atlanta. That's where my brother lives. So we went and looked for a place for them to live. And we moved them. I mean, and you know, you say that in a sentence, it takes a month. We moved them, and it turned out, of course, that Mom was so far gone that she could not live with my father. So after 62 years of marriage, we separated them. And that was huge. We put her into a memory care unit, whereupon I discovered that just because you have Alzheimer's does not mean you lose your intelligence. Because Mom, an honors graduate of American University, pulled the fire alarm and all the doors to the memory care open. Even though they're not supposed to, even for a fire alarm, they totally opened up. Mom escaped. And the only reason they had to call and tell us is because a motorist saw Mom, called the police, and said, I think someone's escaped from that old person's home in this area.
What a terrible way to put that.
I know. And the police went and got her. And this is what's worse. This tells you I'm a lawyer, right? So police went and got her. They did not even realize she was missing. She was so new. They did not even account for all their patients. So this lawyer made a little money for Mom and Dad and moved her out of that place. And then we had to find her another place, which was close to Dad. He was still driving, which we did. But it's when I realized that there is no one number to call. Hey, Mom has dementia. What should I do? 2, we need to move Mom and Dad. What should I do? You know, there was nothing. You can call Social Security. They'll tell you about Social Security. Medicare, they'll tell you about Medicare. Medicaid, they'll tell you about Medicaid. But no one will say, oh, dear. And even Mom and Dad's doctor, I ended up firing their doctor in Atlanta, which means you fire the insurance company because, you know, those Medicare Advantage plans, it's all about this network. I hate Medicare Advantage plans, but Mom and Dad had one. So all of a sudden, I was like, wow, okay, this is its own medical industrial complex. And that's how my journey started.
Well, we as providers also very much dislike Advantage plans.
I know. They're horrible.
They market them so well. And, you know, older adults think that they're the best options.
Because they get a credit card and get to go buy $30 worth of stuff every day. So that's $30 that's not going to your medical care. Hello.
We'll be right back.
Quick pause. Are you caring for a loved one? Recharge inside the Aging Together Caregiver Hub, our free online community packed with expert tips, live Q&As, and peers who truly get it. Join in seconds at aging-together.com, then dive back into the show feeling supported.
Yeah. Well, and then I think sometimes they add on stuff like, we'll cover your gym membership and we'll cover this and we'll cover that. And like, yeah, in theory, it sounds nice, but how many of them are going to the gym?
Right. And more importantly, have you seen the gyms? I mean, it's not like you get to go to Life Bridge Fitness, you know, you get to go to whatever except the Medicare Advantage program. Medicaid does a better job in Advantage programs than Medicare does.
Yeah. But there's a lot of hoops you have to go through for even qualifying for Medicaid.
which is why I'm a Medicaid planning lawyer.
Yeah, absolutely.
But how sad. How sad.
Yeah.
And I'm not inexpensive. I mean, we charge, our regular retainers are a month of rent, room and board in a Medicaid facility, which is anywhere from, depending on your area, $8,000 to $12,000.
Yeah.
And depending on what I have to do, I charge anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000 for a wealthy, rich person to get into Medicaid, because it can be done. But the person who really needs it, they can't come to me.
Yeah.
I mean, and don't get me wrong, I do things for free. I have put several people in on a pro bono basis because it is who I am and who mom and dad raised. But I'm here to tell you that I know it's not fair.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think we touched on your book yet, though. Tell me about your book. Where did that come from?
We lawyers, we love to write. What happened was, I think I had at least one book in me. So I went to a writing class, and I did have a book in me. I mean, writing a book is nothing more than discipline. I took every Sunday, and then we had COVID, which of course helped, but I took every Sunday for 2 to 3 hours. And that was when I wrote the book. And it was the discipline of Sunday afternoons. Didn't matter what else was going on. I said no to it. And the book came straight from my heart. I mean, it was like being able to regurgitate everything I'd been feeling, not just about, because when all this started, I was really angry at how mom and dad had been treated and were treated. I mean, I was angry. And when I go back to my first articles, I started out by writing articles for a couple of newspapers, a community paper that goes throughout Miami. And then where I live, it's a community of 12,000 people. And we have our own little newspaper. So I wrote the same column for them. And my first columns are just so angry about how awful. Well, I mean, for instance, and this is still the case, everybody thinks that hospice is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And it is, if you get a good hospice. But there are a lot of bad hospices out there. And usually they're for profit. I always say that. I know Vitas hates me for that, but I am not a fan of Vitas hospice. And, you put your mom or your dad in hospice, and the first thing you get is a wheelchair, but gosh, you've already had one. You know what I'm saying? They do anything they can to get their money from Medicare. And that part drives me nuts. They put you into this bed, takes you out of your old bed. And then if you had those bed rails, they'll take off the bed rails. And I was very lucky because my father was in an assisted living center when he went into hospice, and mother was in a nursing home. They both had long-term care, but mom ran out of hers. So we ended up putting her in a nursing home because my brother and I could not afford $12,000 a month to have dad in a assisted living and mom in a memory care. That's what it would cost, $12,000 a month. $144,000 a year. People don't realize that. So that being said, dad's hospice was horrible. I had to be on them. Well, mom died first. And what happened in her hospice, she was in as I said, a nursing home. And they called me and they said, well, we think it's time for Charlotte to go into hospice. I said, really? I thought she needed hospice before they did. And they said, yep, we definitely think it's hospice time. And she was maybe in hospice a month. They really pegged it. And when it was time for her to die, They honestly, they held our hands. I mean, I still remember I happened to be in Atlanta. I walked in, it was a day for her to get her hair done. I walked in and everybody saw me. They already knew that she'd had the stroke and we were there. So my brother was out of town. So I called Matt and we decided to give her, of course, well, first what I did was I went back and got Dad. And I said, Dad, it looks like mom's close to death. And so he came back with me and I was a basket case. It's so funny, I mean, tears well up in my eyes as I think about it because, she is laying in bed and she can't communicate now. She has oxygen on and her little eyes are just going everywhere because she probably knows what's going on, but can't really do much more than recognize what's going on. So my brother and I decided to have last rites. She was one of these folks who had, she went to church every Sunday, unlike her daughter, and or this daughter, let me say. She has another daughter who does very well there. And so we had Matt's priest come and do last rites. And that's when I realized how important rituals are. I mean, not only did last rites calm down mom, it calmed down me. I mean, my tears sort of subsided and I could focus on what was important to my mother, because it is a little selfish when you think about it to be sitting there crying when they're the ones who are dying and, taking attention away. So we left at around 4:00 that afternoon. And then the next day she was still alive and my dad chose not to go. I went and I did what I did every time I went to see my mom. I took my little speaker and we would sing together. We would sing all her old songs. I can still sing them. Tootsie, goodbye. Tootsie, don't cry. So, and I had a little playlist for her, Frank Sinatra, Mitch Miller. We grew up outside of the U.S., so we sang the Navy song, the Air Force song, the Army song, the Marine song. And so I would do that every time I'd visit her. And of course, she couldn't sing, so I just sang for her. And, we spent about 2 hours together and I left and she died about 4 hours later. It was about 1 a.m. in the evening and they called me, of course, woke me up, but I was at peace. So I didn't even go and wake up my brother. It was like we had everything taken care of. And that's something I urge everybody to do. Hospice makes you do it, but you have to do that. I mean, I already have, my husband is in a home and we just signed the DNR and all that stuff. And I called the funeral home that I always use for all my clients. And I mean, imagine a lawyer. I have my own funeral home, but they're great. And if anything should happen to Tom, I'm not going to get up and go over there and do all that stuff. They'll know to call the funeral home and then everything's fine. And it's a much more peaceful way to end things. Of course, we had to go tell Dad. So my brother and I went over there together. And I used to be dramatic. Now, I still am dramatic. But I used to be really dramatic. And my brother is still pretty dramatic. And, the way he told Dad, I was like, I don't know, we needed that much drama. but, he wanted to feel it. And, Dad was fine with it. I'm sure he shed tears, but it's like when you've been taking care of a cancer patient. Before we put mom into a home, the long-term care facility and then the nursing home, he'd been the one who had been dealing with her incontinence. I mean, he'd had 2 years off of that. And I think also, if you keep your cancer patients at home, the same thing happens. There's a lot there that isn't fun. And he insisted on a funeral. We had a funeral for when they both died, but he insisted on one now in Atlanta, which we did. So all of that is chronicled in my book. And as I went through this process with mom and dad, I realized how important it is for us to live every day of our lives. I mean, my father at this point was 93 and mom was 88 when she died. And listen, they had had a good life. Now, mom had dementia for probably the last 8 years, and it progressed, but she never forgot who we were. In fact, the last time I was together with mom and dad, I love this story, and it's in the book. I asked mom, do you remember who I am? And she said yes, but in her way. Mom and I hadn't always gotten along, but she goes, of course I know who you are, Franny. How could I ever forget you? And then I turned to my father. And I said, and do you know who this guy is? Like that. And you know what she said? She goes, him? Of course I know who he is. He's the love of my life. Last words out of my mother's mouth to my father. Oh my goodness.
That's so sweet.
It is sweet. But what I do with the book is it's a memoir in a way, but it's also about that's why you have to live, because you are going to die. I mean, besides mom and dad, Queen Elizabeth died. The Pope just died. Look, I mean, we always know popes die because they have to get back to Jesus, right? But Queen Elizabeth didn't have to die. It's just what happens. And there are so many people, my husband included, who just aren't going to admit it. So the book does a little of that. And then the first part of the book is really the motivational part of it. Boomers booming, how to thrive after 65. There are so many ways. I mean, you have to travel, you have to put yourself out there and have good sex because, when you retire, you have more time for sex.
What are you going to do with all that time?
Exactly. You can only watch so much TV. Why do you think so many people before TV, there was all these children in all these families? Then the birth control pill came in and television.
You're probably going to get into this in a minute, but your book, you highlight the 10 commandments for older adults. And I just want to hear a brief introduction to what are these top 10 commandments and what was your philosophy behind them?
Well, first of all, I'm in my 60s now. I mean, of course. No, I'm not in my 60s. I think I'm in my 60s. I just turned 71.
Wow. So you wrote this book for yourself.
Well, in the end, it takes a long time to write. It takes about 2 years to write a book. And let me go to my 10 commandments. Well, first of all, the 10 commandments are you have to live your life your way. I mean, the kids are grown. The last dog died. What is it you've always wanted to do? And if it's sit by the window and eat bonbons and read your favorite book, you go do that. You also have to do what you love. If you want to be a grandmother, if that's what you've always wanted to do, well, then be a grandmother. I mean, I point that out in the very beginning of the book with the woman in the Armani dress. Guess which one I am? The woman in the Armani dress versus a grandmother in, her comfortable shoes with the T-shirt that says, I love grandma. Both of those versus, she's worried about getting the kids fed and I'm worried about getting the orange juice spritzer. But there's nothing wrong with either one of those. Nothing at all. And you have to respect, this is something we don't do, respect and trust the younger generation. Remember how our parents always said, oh my gosh, in my day, that was only a nickel. Well, okay, now they're $1.25. Okay, you don't have to remind people, oh, in my day, or not think that the younger generation doesn't have something to say. In fact, I love parties where the parents invite their kids because you have from 21 to 98 there. And those 21-year-olds can teach you a whole lot. For instance, one of my favorites is how to drink vodka through the little slider. It comes down this little mountain, and there you are at the bottom, right? I didn't know how to do that. We didn't do that when I was that age. And then the other thing I think you have to do as an older person is develop attitude. Like, hey, you see who I am? I am Miss Wisdom. I am Miss Experience. And I am ready to learn with my wisdom and my experience. And I think very important for all of us is you have to stay relevant. What does that mean? You have to listen to podcasts. You have to learn how to use an iPhone or an Android. Sorry. You have to learn how to use a computer. You have to know what an iPad or a Surface tablet is. You can choose which one you want. The other thing you have to do is let go of your children and their financial situations. I do a lot of estate planning. And the bottom line is these people are so worried about what their kids are going to get. My father, maybe that's why I have this in here. My father always said, I'm going to spend all my money before I die. And you know what? He nearly did. He left us, I think, $31,000. That was it. And all three of us were delighted. They lived their lives. Now, as we all know, part of my book is how to have good sex. But to have good sex is one of the 10 commandments. You must exercise. You have to go walking. I suggest, if you want to have sex with someone, maybe invite them to go walking so that you're both in shape for this experience. But you have to lift some weights. And you'll be surprised, like, I do this 3 times a week. I walk. I've always been a runner. Now I'm a walker. So I put in about 6 miles a day, most days. And then 2 or 3 times a week, I go to this exercise class. And I've met this wonderful group of women. I'm pretty sure I'm the oldest one there. But, it's this whole new group. This is horrible to say. I met this little girl, she's in her 50s, right? Who was a virgin when she got married. I'm like, really? I was like, wow, because I wasn't a virgin. I see this very stern look on your face.
Oh,
am I going off topic?
it's part of your book, right? Go for it.
And don't stress. What's the name of that book? Don't stress about the little stuff, and it's all little stuff, And I think this is probably one of the most important things. Forgive. Forgive. If you have an issue with someone, now's the time. Just get rid of the issue. If you can't really get rid of it, forgive, because as long as if you give it away and say, I'm really sorry this happened. I want to do anything I can to make it better. Once you've done that, you've done all you can do, and you can let it go. And, when you forgive, then you know who you are. And that's really hard. And I think that's one of the best parts about aging. You begin to realize how much you know yourself. And one of those things is, especially with women, but men are this way too. That whole imposter syndrome, the fact that we don't think we know as much as we actually know. And even on this podcast, it's like, wow, why am I so important that she wants to interview me? Well, I mean, here's why, because I wrote this book, Boomers Booming. And, I have a lot of experience. And not only did I put my parents through all this, I also put my husband through it and was a caretaker and wrote articles on the fact that caretaking is not a sentence. It is a choice. And if that's what you want to do, you go, honey. If it's not what you want to do, that's okay too. So those are sort of my 10 commandments. I call them boomer commandments.
I love it. And I love that you're sort of really challenging what it means to be over 65, right? I've told a lot of newer practitioners this, but when I first started practicing almost a decade ago, people over 65, 70 were generally frail, not super healthy, and we would be starting to make recommendations for help at home or rehab or nursing facilities. And I will say, like this past decade, I mean, when I see patients today, I have patients in their 80s and 90s who are killing it. They're still driving, they're living on their own, they're still cooking, and some are still working because they refuse to stop working. You seem like someone who would refuse to stop working.
No, it's true. My girlfriend who has Parkinson's is in her 90s. I mean, look, someone's 20 years older than I am. How fun is that? And she's still out there. A lot of real estate agents are in their 80s. I mean, I do state in my book, because this is the average, at about 85. People do start to slow down. There is going to be a little bit of a slowdown. Not everyone, though. I mean, I'm not saying, it's like I turned 70 and all of a sudden I have bursitis. I'm like, bursitis, that's an old people's. And I go back and forth as to whether or not I want to get the injection so that it doesn't hurt, or just take ibuprofen, you know what I'm saying? I mean, that doesn't stop me from walking my 6 miles or going to this class. I also have arthritis. And I also have falling thighs. Now that I am really pissed about. I'm just saying it because I was a ballerina growing up until it turned out 5'10" was a little tall for this stage, because everyone else is 5'2" or 5'3". The men are 5'7". That's a tall guy. But I was a ballerina. And then when that stopped, I joined the Texas Christian University track team. And I've been running, I've been working out my entire life. And always, I never thought that my thighs would fall, that my arms, would get wrinkled. And I am really angry about that because it happened. Period. I'm here to tell you, I'm living proof that even though I don't have, that huge thing when you wave, and this little thing goes back and forth, but it's there. And, there I am doing those stupid things. Drives me nuts.
If only that just took all that away, right?
I know.
So we've mentioned how aging comes with a lot of societal stereotypes and stigma, especially the older you get. How do you hope, and I think you've shed light on this already a little bit, but how do you hope your book challenges these misconceptions about what life after 65 can look like?
Well, my lifestyle. I encourage people, when I say stay relevant, look, if you have the money, you ought to be traveling. I mean, even if you only travel in the United States, do you know how many amazing national parks we have? Thank you to Teddy Roosevelt. And if you haven't seen the Badlands of South Dakota, it's time for you to go. You know what I'm saying? I mean, Badlands, I thought they were just Badlands. No, it's so much more than that. I mean, it's this whole geographical experience. If you haven't seen the Grand Canyon, you have to go to the Grand Canyon. It's so huge. It's like every picture you see of it and you're there, you're like, and then, you think somehow or another that you're actually going to see the Colorado River at the bottom, but you can't see the Colorado River at the bottom because it's way too far down there. If you have the money to travel to Spain or places like believe it or not, I got to all my bucket list places. So now I'm adding new bucket list places.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, why was I waiting? I wanted to go to Venice. So I just went to Venice. I'm delighted I went to Venice. I went all by myself because my husband couldn't go. It was fun. I didn't have to worry about someone saying, I'm hungry. Do we have to walk another block? It was my very own experience. I know. But so, and I think the other thing I'd say is, what do you have to lose by trying to be social, by trying to get out there and become relevant? They have classes on how to use a computer. They have classes on how to use an Excel spreadsheet, which I go to probably once every other year because I only need to use that stupid Excel spreadsheet about once every other year. Now I've hired someone to do it for me. There's all these, they're called Ollie classes. They have classes on World War II, World War I, the Civil War, classes on wellness at universities that you can go to and meet other people just like you who are interested in whatever that might be. And it gets you out of where you are. But my book also talks about, and it starts in chapter 11, that you have to plan for this. Whether you leave a will or an estate, a trust, or just manage your financial instruments so that your people that are left behind don't have this morass to deal with. And I'm going to tell you what a morass is like. RESPECT. I'm looking at her face. The woman who's saying RESPECT. Oh, come on. Pooja, how could you not know her?
I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm actually really, really bad at pop culture. So I have no idea.
Right. I'm going to go to Audrey Hepburn and then I'll think of Aretha Franklin.
There you go.
That's her name. Aretha Franklin had pancreatic cancer. She knew she was going to die. Didn't matter how many times she asked the doctor, she knew she was going to die. And she planned her outfit, everything. But do you think she had a will? Do you think anyone found a will? No. But surprisingly, a week later, her 4 sons each came up with a will. Isn't that amazing? So
we hear this way too many times, right?
Yeah. Then the IRS came calling. She owed $80 million in back taxes. Talk about a bad business manager. So now, when you owe IRS money, there's interest that goes with it. So imagine interest on $80 million. And that's probably, in Aretha's world, that was probably only 3 or 4 years. I mean, she made a lot of money. But now, because she has died, not only do you have to pay that $80 million, you're also going to have to pay for all the money her estate's going to make because she's Aretha Franklin, and the movie that's going to be made of her, how often her songs are going to be sung, because all that copyright lasts 100 years. So they just settled it last year. So it took 5 years for them to settle. And she knew she was going to die. Audrey Hepburn had a will. She had a trust. And this is what she told her 2 sons who were the beneficiaries. All her movie memorabilia, Breakfast at Tiffany's, My Fair Lady, just 2 major movies we might want to think about that she was in. She told her sons, oh, you guys divide that movie memorabilia amongst yourselves. You'll know what you want. 25 years later, it was done.
Yeah.
So you have to plan. It's not fair. It is not fair to ruin someone else's life because you didn't think you were going to die. And if you're out and traveling, whether you're going to parks or the theater or the Antarctica cruise with your fur coat that you just bought for the Antarctica cruise, you need to know that should you die, on that Antarctica cruise, everything's fine at home. You're set. All they have to do is get you back to the house. In my case, I'm so planned.
Of course, that's what you do for a living, right?
Well, this cobbler does have her shoes on. Not all do, but nevertheless, I'm going to be cremated. And the cremation policy I have means that they have to come wherever I am in the world and pick me up and bring my ashes back to my nephew, who is the power of attorney and my trustee in my trust. So, and when I talk about it, I say, I hope they have to come to Nice or,
Antarctica.
Yeah, exactly.
In your fur coat.
Exactly. And I want that fur coat as you're taking me down that crematorium, babe. No one else can have it.
I think we've touched on a ton of the legal and financial aspects that we need to plan, right? This is something I talk about a lot too when we do our proactive care planning, and then I connect them to the appropriate financial and legal advisors. But a big part of this is also mindset, right? Like people have to get into the mindset that this is important. I feel like a broken record because I say this, I think, in every episode, but people are constantly telling me, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. And it has become one of my most disliked phrases in the world because you don't know when that bridge is coming. You don't know if it's tomorrow. You don't know if it's in 10 years from now. Why wouldn't you prepare for that bridge, right? So what mindset shifts do you believe are crucial for older adults to embrace this phase of life and proactively plan as you're telling them to do?
When I speak to people about this, I admit, because I think it's important to admit, that I'm afraid of death. It's not like, just because I talk about it doesn't mean that I'm ready to walk out this door and, be hit by a bus and die. Although it would be very simple. You know what I'm saying? It's not like I'd have to lay in bed. But I think I'd prefer to lay in bed and let people come kiss my rings and have folks come and ask forgiveness. I mean, I really think that that's how I'd prefer to die, which is so narcissistic, right? But I do talk about a little bit of the fear. I mean, because I'll be gone. I mean, no one really knows, some, like the Pope, had great faith. I'm not sure Aretha Franklin did. Steve Jobs, he for sure thought when he dies, it's all over. So we each have our own, I almost hate to use this, it's a little on the trite side, our own come to Jesus, whether it's Jesus or Muhammad or Jehovah. We each have to figure that out. And the older we get, I mean, I'm 70, I'm planning on, the advertisement for my book is I'm planning on another 70 years. And if you want to know how to do it, buy my book. But it's all about the quality of life, right? And that we want to die with quality. And that means we have to work at it every day. That means it's not that you have to read Boomers Booming, but you have to read. And if you want to get the newspaper so that the newspaper is what you're reading, okay, that's fine. And what you have to understand that it is so much easier to take that last breath knowing everything's planned. You're set. You're okay. You have crossed the bridge and you can cross it, whether it's I-95 or one of those little rope ones, I've done a lot of adventuresome things, haven't done that one yet. But I have faced death. Like I've jumped out of airplanes, I've zip-lined, I stupidly, this is the one that is the scariest, luged. Luge is that thing on the ice, where during the Olympics, those guys one guy's in it, the other guy starts it on the ice and then jumps in and they get to like 120 miles an hour. I mean, that I will never do again. But the fact that they don't die is amazing. But I've trapezed. I've done everything to feel real, to feel life. Now, that's me. Not some people, all they need to do is eat chocolate from Switzerland, which I've also done and loved, which, by the way, is okay. There's no reason you can't do that. But death is going to come, and it's not a bridge that you can cross. You get to that bridge, and then you cross over to whatever it is. And that's why we have hospice, because a good hospice will make that the most pleasurable experience possible. I have a friend, his name was Skip, Skip and Chris, and they were such a great couple. And he got cancer. It was a pretty tough cancer, and fought it. And then one day he went in and they said, well, unfortunately, we're going to have to try this chemo. And without having talked to his wife, without even having said a word to anyone, he said to the doctor, I'm tired of this. I'm just ready to die. And Chris, his wife, Skip, Skip he's a big man, and he said it in a big way. I'm just ready to die. The kids are all taken care of. Chris is taken care of. I'm done. I am done. I don't want any more of this. And Chris I remember she called me as she left and she goes, he just did it all by himself. He just chose. Then Chris would go and sit with him, he was in a nice place, and she'd go and take a book or something. And he'd wake up and he'd say, am I still alive? When do I die, damn it? I mean, so, we all have our own way. But the bottom line is he knew he was ready. Just bring the bridge to him, please, was kind of how he felt. And I mean, for Chris, it was devastating. She didn't want her husband to die, but she knew that this was the best way for him. So, we all have our way, and choose it. The best thing you can do about death is live the best life possible. And you have your celebration of life before you die. We did Dad's celebration at the age of 90. And had he not died at 94, we would have done another one at 95. Because don't you want to hear all the lies people tell about you when you're gone? I mean, one friend, actually, I think it was his 80th birthday, and he was in the coffin and had a march from one bar to the next bar to the next bar for his 80th birthday celebration of life. Because, they do it that way in New Orleans for funerals. But I mean, when I get an invitation for a celebration of life, I'm like, really? Isn't it just a little late? I mean, we're celebrating life, so do it now. Don't wait.
Yeah. I mean, that happens a lot, right? My mom always says that too. It's like when someone's sick, people don't take out the time to go visit them, to go spend some time with them, to go share memories with them. But then the minute they die, everybody flies out for a funeral. And what's the point of that? The person's not going to know that you were there. And yeah, I do think that it's a little backward. And I love that concept of having that before you die, so that you get to experience that and see people before that.
I do that all the time. One of my husband's cousins had gotten a bad diagnosis. And of course, one of his sisters-in-law is in the pharmaceutical industry. So she was always trying to get her into another study, And look, I was thrilled that all of that was happening, but I thought we should go see her while she was still alive, period. And we did. And the whole family looked at us like, why are you here? Well, we want to we wanted to see Betty alive. What good does it do us? And I do that with anyone that I think is sick. And I still remember when I was in law school and I put myself through, so I couldn't afford anything. My grandmother, with whom I was very close, she was up in Iowa and very sick, close to death. And I begged Mom to let me go up there and say goodbye. But, she needed to pay for it. And she said, oh, you can say goodbye later, and I'm not saying goodbye when Mimi's dead. What good is that? So I've never, ever forgotten that. And my father was really good about that also. I think it's his gene that inspires me on some of this stuff. And Dad died 4 months after Mom. In other words, he wanted her taken care of. Once she'd gone, I knew he was going to go.
Yeah. That's fairly common, I think, especially at those older ages. If people have been married for, decades on decades, they just want to make sure each other are taken care of. And oftentimes they pass within weeks, months, very few last a year without their significant other when it's something age related at that point.
Right. And when that's all it is, and surprisingly, when it's a long illness, they take care of them and then they move on to live for a much longer time. They have a whole new life without them, which is, I don't know how to say this. In a way, Mom and Dad lived until I was 65 years old. So I'd had them all my life. And the hardest part was, like when I wrote the book, I couldn't call them. Oh my gosh, you're all over this book. There are photos of you all over that. See? Photo, Mom and Dad. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They weren't here to share it because they were such a part of my life. But if you lose a parent certainly as a child, but at 30 or 40, it's like you know how to live without that parent. And I'm not saying, I didn't lose a parent at that age. And so I'm not trying to draw any kind of a comparison. But because, both Mom and Dad were there for both my weddings. But it was, I still cry. You saw my tears when I was talking about Mom.
It's hard.
And I can say with my husband, it isn't the same. Caretaking was not the same. Now, part of it was, I think, the marriage. But, I go see him and I make sure he is well taken care of, and he is. He's in a great place. But he had Alzheimer's when the book was published. So he wasn't here for that part of it. But it's not like when I got a promotion, the first person I would call would be Mom or Dad. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't my husband. And that might speak to the marriage. I'm just saying that caretaking for Tom was a drudge. You wake up in the middle of the night, you have to clean up poop, you have to clean up on the floor and on the bed and all this stuff. And it's not his fault. It's not like you can get angry with him. You know what I'm saying? And then if he fell, I couldn't pick him up and I didn't cook. I will say the place he's in, he loves the food. It's because he only ate frozen food until we could get him in there, because that's all I knew how to do. That was a learning experience.
Yeah. As we're getting close to the hour here, if listeners were to take away one core message from your book, what would it be?
I think that you have to remember that sickness is almost always temporary, even if it's your last one. So you have to have faith and laugh.
That's a great takeaway. How can people find you if they want to learn more about you or your book or your services?
Well, my name is H. Francis Reeves, Esquire, and I practice law in Florida, and I'm also licensed in Maryland. My website is parentyourparents.com, and that's where my book is. It's also on Amazon. And, you're welcome to call me. It's 786-418-3303. But I think the best thing to do, truthfully, is just go on my website and send me an email. I answer, between me and the staff, we answer every one of them because we really do care. I want you to live your best life.
I love that. I'm sure, I can see your face, so I know that you are full of energy. For those who are listening on audio, I'm sure you can tell the energy that comes from Frances. So, Frances, thank you so much for being here and for this wonderful conversation.
Pooja, thank you so much for what you're doing and what you're doing every day with your work. It's so important. And I have to say, I think we're moving slowly, but we're moving towards accepting elders as an important part of our society.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for listening to the Aging Together podcast. This episode was produced by me, Dr. Pooja A. Patel, in partnership with Natural Eye Media, and is supported by our Season 4 sponsor, Safety Grip by Heart Mobility. To learn more about them, check out our sponsor spotlight episode. If today's conversation helped you, please follow the show, share it with a friend, and leave a quick rating or review. Your support keeps the podcast free, at light, and growing. Want more? Join our live sessions every other Wednesday and unlock the subscriber-only audio replays through the link in the show notes. Until next time, let's keep learning and aging together. Take care.
Aging, illness, and injury can make the simplest movements feel daunting. That's why Safety Grip was designed with compassion at its core. Its deep textured surface offers real control, especially for hands weakened by arthritis, neuropathy, or stroke, helping restore not just safety, but dignity. Because when you or someone you love needs support, it should feel like someone's there to help. Visit heartmobility.com to learn more.